movie starts with Paul and his mother, Lady Jessica, among the Fremen people. Meanwhile, a group of Harkonnen soldiers were searching for the Fremen but were ambushed and attacked by the Fremen. They kept fighting them with all their might. Paul manages to get to one of the soldiers and fights him fiercely, eventually defeating him. Another soldier tries to escape from Paul, but Lady Jessica hits him with a rock, finishing him off and giving them some peace. And now, Paul and Lady Jessica, after all that happened, go with the Fremen people to their settlement. As soon as they arrive, Stilgar, a Fremen leader who we've seen before with Paul and Lady Jessica in the first part, sits down with the elders. Stilgar tries to convince them to allow Paul and Lady Jessica to live among them. Stilgar is very confident that Paul will free their people from the Harkonnen and thus must live among them. One day, they will certainly follow him and he himself will liberate them from the Harkonnen and the Fremen people. She convinced Cabra and Fremen to agree, but under the condition that this would remain a holy nation special to their people. Because they posit their holy nation is basically dying, Lydie learned magic from her group of sorcerers and could talk to Stilgar at the time. Immediately, he went to Lydie to propose the idea. Although she was scared, she agreed. Otherwise, the Fremen would finish her and her son. And also Lydie went to speak with Bunwa about everything that happened, and Bra agreed with her that this would remain their holy nation as there was no other solution. There wasn't much time left, so they went to speak with the current Holy Lady, who by now was very old and about to die. Now, the Holy Lady's helpers asked Lydie to drink some strange water. Lydie drank it and began to choke in a mysterious way. But she recovered and didn't die. Instead, she turned blue, just like the Fremen people. This meant she had passed the test and became one of the Fremen. Stilgar was very pleased and went to his people, including Paul, Honey, and others, to announce that Lydie was now the new Holy Mother to their people. This meant that Paul, her son, was their savior and they had to follow him. Many of the Fremen people objected to Stilgar's declaration because they did not believe in it. Meanwhile, Paul talked with Stilgar and revealed he wasn't actually the savior, but someone who lost his father, family, and friends to the Harkonnens and wanted to fight them alongside the Fremen to restore justice. Stilgar respected Paul's words and decided to make him one of them. However, to become one of them, Paul had to first learn to live in the desert and master the ways of the Fremen. Indeed, Paul began to learn everything from Hania, even how to walk and survive in the desert. Paul was very happy to learn all this. One day, Paul became one of the Fremen, and he was also happy because he was becoming closer to Hania, who he had admired for a long time. After a period of training and learning, they met with Rabban, the leader of the Harkonnens, who we also saw in the first part. Rabban learned what happened to his troops during their last reconnaissance mission and that they were all killed by the Fremen. This enraged Rabban so much that he started hating his assistant without reason and decided he would extract the spices from the planet by force, even if it meant exterminating all the Fremen and taking over the planet entirely. Meanwhile, they see a giant Harkonnen spaceship extracting spices from the ground, guarded by troops. The Fremen, including Paul and Hania, attacked the guards. Paul fought the troops vigorously, killing many with immense bravery. Paul and Hania, along with the Fremen, destroyed the ship completely and returned safely. That night, everyone celebrated their great achievement of the day. Stilgar praised Paul for his bravery, saying that Paul's actions today officially made him one of the Fremen, which made Paul very happy. Meanwhile, Kaban goes to meet the Baron, the head of the Harkonnen. We mentioned in the first part, his name is Vladimir. To make it more fitting, let's just call him the Baron throughout the film. The Baron realizes that he is failing and losing heavily against the Fremen soldiers. He also knows that if he loses much more, he will be removed from his leadership role over the soldiers on the planet Arrakis. So, Rabban is reluctantly left and walks away. Around this time, Paul wakes up from a troubled sleep with Johnny next to him, asking what he just dreamt about. Paul realizes that he dreamt of someone he does not know and saw himself being chased in the dream. He also saw a massive war where many people died. Johnny and Paul start to wonder if these dreams might not be real and instead could be planted by the Harkonnen spies to scare him. Paul understands the situation and feels quite uneasy. Afterwards, Stilgar comes to Paul and tells him that this is his final test. The test is, in short, to try and ride a giant sandworm to prove whether he truly belongs to the Fremen or not. Stilgar gives Paul a lot of advice on how to manage and ride the sandworm. Paul follows Stilgar's advice and along with some device he sets on the ground that creates vibrations to lure the sandworm. Paul then tries to jump on its back. After many difficult attempts, Paul finally manages to ride the Sandworm and navigate it smoothly. This makes Tilda and all the Fremen very happy. They cheer a lot, feeling sure now that Paul is truly one of them. They believe that one day he will become their savior. This news reaches Irulan, or rather the Holy Mother of the Fremen, who is very delighted. She decides to head south for two reasons. First, because she is supposedly pregnant, and second, to rally the people of the south to unite with her son Paul and fight against the Harkonnen and the Empire. A few days later, you see the Fremen preparing things for Irulan to travel south. Irulan tries to convince Paul to join her, but he refuses. Paul does not see himself as the savior and therefore does not want to unite with the southern tribes based on a prophecy. She understands his words and gives me what only the south has to offer. After a few days, we see Rabban gathering a large army to attack the Fremens and prove to the Baron that he deserves to stay here on planet Arrakis and lead the army. Rabban takes his army and attacks the Fremens fiercely. The Fremens, with Paul of course, fight Rabban with great strength and intensity. They manage to defeat Rabban thoroughly, to the point where Rabban himself nearly dies but escapes just in time. This news reaches the Emperor and his daughter. The Emperor is very concerned because he feels that the Fremens are getting stronger by the day and they could defeat his elite army at any moment. This poses a threat to the Emperor's throne. But the Emperor's daughter suggests to him that he leave the war ongoing and step in later to rescue the situation, appearing as the savior and thus strengthening his throne even more. The Emperor is convinced and decides to follow her advice. Now, my friend, we go to the planet of the Harkonnens. We see a Harkonnen named Father Rauta, who is the nephew and brother of the Baron. Currently, Fade is in a strong fight with a group of fighters and easily defeats them, showing his great strength. As after this fight, the Baron talks to Fade and tells him that he will make him the commander of the army on planet Arrakis instead of his brother Rabban. Fade is very happy because he has been waiting for this position for a long time. Then we see Fade heading to the desert, and there he meets someone named Margot. Margot is from the group of witches, like Lady Jessica. She is currently testing Fade with the box test. From this test, she can confirm that Fade is strong and has the potential to be the Emperor or the savior of the universe. Margot then goes to the leader of the witches and informs her of everything that has happened. The leader is pleased and decides they will control Fade until he becomes the Emperor and their leader. If he fails in his mission, Margot, who is pregnant with his child, will be the one to take over. We then see the Baron officially appointing Fade in front of all the Harkonnens to lead the army on planet Arrakis. Fade is, of course, very pleased with this mission. The next day, we see Paul and the rest catching a group of smugglers who came to steal spices from the planet. Among the smugglers, Paul recognizes someone he knows very well, his trainer and his father's personal guard, Godani Halik, who we saw in the first part. Of course, they don't see Paulo stopping everyone and sitting down to talk to Greenie and learning from him that he didn't die in the war that happened in Algeria. He managed to escape and got to know some smugglers and worked with them until he met Paulo by chance. Paulo welcomed Greenie very much, and Greenie decided to stay with him here and with the Fremen. But at night, Greenie sits with Paulo and keeps advising him to go south because there's a very strong army called the Asulian army, and they will definitely help him a lot in his war against the Hodakan people and also the Emperor. But Paulo refuses because he saw that if he went south, many people would die, and he does not want that. So Greenie is left in a dilemma. At the end of the duel, Paul cheers and Greenie realizes that Paul knows where Hein's weapons are on the planet Arrakis. Indeed, the next day, Greenie takes Paul to the location of these weapons, which makes Paul very happy because he can now ready his army for the upcoming war. In the south, at the same time, Lady arrives and heads to a secret temple of the natives. Leaving in the south, Lady has a serious conversation with the monks in the temple, telling her that when Paul arrives, they will test him to confirm that he is the prophesied savior of the stars. A great alignment happens. But eventually, we see that Fade and his army arrive at Paul's location, destroying everything in their path. This forces Paul and everyone to ride giant worms and move south, even though Paul didn't want this because of the many dreams he had. And what happens? As soon as Paul gets to the south, he goes to the temple of the natives, where the monks makes him drink the blue water. Yes, my friend, this blue water is the essence of the giant worms. In any case, Paul drinks this water, which causes his death for a few minutes, making his beloved Shani frantic. Yet Paul comes back to life and realizes he can see into the future after drinking the water. He tells his mother that he now knows he must become the emperor, not just stop the Harkonnen army and fight with the Fremen. Paul says that he can become the emperor of the universe. Therefore, to execute his plan, Paul gathers all the freemen and natives under his command, making them submit to him after witnessing that he drank the poison and survived. Paul's current task is to speak to them and inform them that he will start a massive war against the empire to take over and become the emperor. Paul annoys at Chani a bit because she feels Paul is changing and seeking power, but Paul doesn't mind and sends a challenge to the emperor. The emperor receives the challenge and is shocked because he thought Paul had died. Despite everything, the emperor decides to go to this war and confront Paul's challenge. The emperor meets his advisor, Baron, and is surprised to know that Paul is still alive. The emperor is equally shocked because he had no idea of all this. Meanwhile, one of the emperor's loyal guards starts attacking the Baron as punishment for his actions, and Paul, along with his navy and native forces, launches an attack on the location. They manage to reach the emperor, and the first thing Paul does is kill the Baron. And meanwhile, Paul's forces fight the remaining Harkonnen troops, including Rabban, who tries to flee. Granny catches up with Rabban and kills him in revenge for what he did in the first part and for killing his people. And the war, my friend, ends quickly because of the immense strength of Paul's army. Paul himself began discussions with the emperor, and they realized that he should kill him for having killed his father, but he won't do that, and the emperor understood this was necessary because your father wasn't strong enough to be the leader of a people, and my choice for him to come to the planet Arrakis from the start was a good one. Of course, Kamal is very angry, but he doesn't care. The emperor knew he wouldn't win, but his daughter would get married against his will, and he would become the new emperor of the Kongal. This talk offends everyone present, including Chani, who loves Paul. But no one speaks. Only Fade interferes and asks Paul to settle their duel now to decide who will marry the emperor's daughter and become the new emperor. Paul agrees eagerly and starts fighting Fade in one of the strongest battles. Fade manages to strike Paul multiple times, but Paul gathers his strength and finally defeats Fade, getting rid of him. The night ends with Paul making the emperor kneel and kiss his hand as a sign that he has become the new emperor. From that moment, Paul decides to roam the universe to make all the youths pledge allegiance to him as the emperor. Also, it seems, Paul takes everyone and leads them off from planet Rax, while Chani, without hesitation, decides to stay on the planet. If you've reached so far in our video, you're officially awesome. Thanks for sticking around with Chat Craze. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to leave a nice comment. Until next time.